my name is Irina Litchfield, and I'm here today to introduce you to David Johnston. David Johnston is a pioneer in crypto space. He is managing partner of Yeoman's Capital. He's also a chairman of Factom, which is kind of an OG crypto company. Not many of them are out there. And also he coined a term Dapps. So he's done also many other amazing things. David is a supporter of nonprofit organizations and just really good guy, you know. I feel like when I see you somewhere, of course outside of our favorite Austin, Texas, I feel like, okay, this is gonna be a good event, this is a good quality, because you just don't go where things are not good, you know, so welcome.
Hey everybody, thanks for the kind words, I appreciate it.
Of course, I mean them. And so I'd like to talk to you first about kind of why you choose to live in Austin, Texas. You're one of the people that actually has the ability to be able to be anywhere in the world. You know, your reach is global, your connections are global, and they're so long that I feel that you could just go and be. So why here? Why Austin? Why Texas?
I guess I really fell in love with the culture here in Austin. I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley, Seattle, New York, Boston, but I didn't really find the same culture. I found that in Austin there was a real desire for collaboration. There was also a lot of open source communities here. And so when I looked at Silicon Valley, there's a lot going on, but it seems hyper competitive as opposed to very collaborative. And I'd rather work with startups and investors and open source communities that are interested in collaborating, because I think those are actually the projects that are most successful over time, are the ones that sort of have this open source ethos, if you will. We've sort of hugely benefited from that in the Bitcoin and blockchain space. Is because every time somebody invents something, it's immediately available to all the other projects in the ecosystem. So we joke about, you know, Bitcoin time or crypto time being so much faster than the rest of the world. You know, my core theory is the reason why is because it's all open source, right? And so instead of something being invented and then patented and then like 10 years later, other companies are using it, it's immediate. It's immediately available to everybody. And so that's a lot funner for me than working inside sort of proprietary boundaries. So that's why I'm here in Austin.
How did you come up with Dapps? How was that born? Because it's a big deal. I mean, now everybody knows what Dapps is, and it is the future. Some people think this is the future, you know, everything is a Dapps. How was it born?
Well, in 2013, I was involved in a lot of the early protocols, and people had started doing token sales and sort of thinking about what comes after Bitcoin. And I wanted to give that a name, and so I thought a lot about what really encapsulated these systems, and decentralized applications is what I came up with. And of course, you need to shorten it because you know, decentralized applications is a bit of a mouthful, and so Dapps or Dapps was sort of born. I wanted to draw an analogy to something like the digitization or making everything electronic. So we saw this in Internet 1.0 with everything was labeled email, right? Short for electronic mail, right? So what was the equivalent for us? I think it was the decentralization. So Dapps seemed like a natural extension, and to differentiate them from centralized applications, okay, what does it need to have to be a Dapp? And so in the Generalized Theory of Decentralized Applications, the white paper that I put out in December of 2013, I sort of made 4 criteria. And I said, okay, obviously it's got to be open source. It has to have a blockchain backend. It has to be a peer-to-peer system that anybody can participate in. And importantly, it has to be tokenized. Because with a cryptocurrency or a token in the system, you could remove the central party, and for the first time, software could pay for its own hardware, right? It could incentivize people to run servers or do whatever behavior you needed for the protocol to succeed. So that was a bit controversial at the time, because a lot of people told me back in 2013, no, there can't be any other tokens other than Bitcoin.
Only Bitcoin.
It's the one true coin, and that's it. But I didn't really see that in the rest of the internet. I didn't see that in the rest of the economy. There's always specialization around different use cases. And so what I basically argued was, hey guys, yes, network effects are very powerful, but they specialize. I mean, you can look at the internet where, Google has been so strong in search, but they haven't done as well in social, right? Or enterprise, for example, right? So these are all different network effects, and there's an opportunity for us to create new decentralized applications that do things like smart contracts and distributed compute and everything else. Yeah. So that really sort of got everything going.
It's a natural course of development,
sure.
Right? To go from one kind of a proof of concept to actually more wider variety in applications.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for answering that. I have another question for you.
Sure.
When we think about fund managers, we think of, people often think they, in glamorous ways, that they lead this lavish lives where they wine and dine and,
sure.
Projects constantly want to get their attention and, I'd like to help viewers get into your, almost like a daily routine of what it is like to be a fund manager.
It's probably not as glamorous as people imagine. I mean, a lot of it's just the hard work of, constantly keeping on top of emails and communications. You do a lot of phone calls. Yeah, you got opportunity to meet a lot of cool startups, but a lot of the time it's understanding whether they sort of really fit your thesis. So as a fund for YGC, Yeoman's Growth Capital, we have this thesis around sort of building the enterprise software built on blockchain that we think will really push mass adoption and these big companies to be able to access blockchain technology. So not everything fits inside that thesis. And we're also focused on later stage projects. So people that you would traditionally think of as like a Series B, Series C, kind of more mature companies. They have a big team, they already have a product, and they need help scaling. They need help really growing and getting to their next level of potential. So a lot of the projects that approach us are maybe too early. So I still make earlier stage investments through my family office, which is Yeoman's Capital. So that's sort of where I do my seed stage activity. But really, it all kind of boils down to communications. Like I spend all my time, responding to one sort of communication or another.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You basically live virtual life.
And yes, there's the travel, and it's great to meet people. And just got back from Switzerland, got a chance to go to Davos for the first time. And then I get to go to Hong Kong and China pretty often. I've sort of, you could generalize very broadly and say that, blockchain technology right now is cool North American tech, housed in friendly European jurisdictions, and funded by Asian capital, right?
Perfect description, perfect description.
It's a little broad, but there's sort of different specialties that we've seen in each community, and everybody's participating in their own way.
What's your most favorite, topping on a cake in crypto right now? What is that just kind of wakes you up and drives you?
I would say when I come across areas where we're actually getting this into the hands of ordinary people. So one of the things I'm most excited about is I talk about a project, CoinText, that lets you text cryptocurrency from my phone number to your phone number. And the beautiful thing is you don't have to register, you don't have to download an app, you don't have to know what a Bitcoin address is. I just send it to your phone number, you receive a text message,
and you hold it.
And amazingly now you have cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of like the ease of use that I think we need to get to for crypto to be really successful. It has to be so intuitive that you can just send it with a text message.
Yeah, once person holds at least a tiny piece of it,
right.
They really dive into it. It's so interesting. I can relate that with my parents.
Sure.
Once I gave them a piece of, tiny bit of Bitcoin,
right.
They now started reading. Before it was, they were just confused and they did not know what's going on. And especially reading news about Silk Road while we were opening an exchange was was very challenging for my family, actually. You know, they thought that we're doing something very, very strange. Yes, and so this is a little bit of a curveball question in a different direction. But what percentage of exchanges, crypto exchanges, you think practice wash trading?
That's a good question. It might, at least from the headlines and the reports, be a high amount. It's hard to know whether it's the exchanges themselves or whether it's market makers or people inside of the exchange ecosystem that are engaged in that. You know, I think people are concerned about that because if you have a bunch of wash trading, it sort of inflates the volumes. But if they're only trading with themselves, it's not really useful. Market makers certainly play a role, and you do want assets that are actively traded, so when somebody shows up to a market, it's very easy to get their order matched. So, you know, in these decentralized systems, it can be interesting to see how people sort of perceive that behavior and, you know, where we need to say, okay, you know, these exchanges aren't participating in that, and so I have a higher level of confidence. And I think it goes back to, you know, fees. You know, there was an earlier time when a lot of the exchanges would charge zero fee, and you'd see more of that type of behavior. Whereas if there's a fee involved, even if it's a very small one, it tends to remove some of that behavior because it becomes very expensive to just trade back and forth if you're not really engaged in useful activity.
Yeah. So what do you think, 50% greater or less?
Hard to say.
Hard to say. Okay. All right. I've had a number of cool answers that that arrived from 25 to actually 95. You know, so and everything in between. So it's been kind of it's interesting to think what people think about it and how they view that subject. So we spent some time in Malta together, and I would love to hear your opinion on global regulatory infrastructure, and what do you think about that?
I think it's headed in a good direction. We see a lot of countries sort of getting very serious about offering sort of clear guidance on how they view not just cryptocurrencies, but security tokens. Now they're asset-backed commodity tokens. And of course, you have utility tokens where you have software licenses like Factom. And so I think Malta has done some really great work on the security token side. I think when it comes to sort of differentiating all the different categories, Switzerland has done a wonderful job because they sort of recognize all 4 of those categories, and have just released some new guidance around a light banking license that will make it easier for projects that are sort of taking this new approach to get licensed there. I've been watching Singapore, what they're doing, as well as Hong Kong with their sandbox. So I would say most of the world's top jurisdictions are really taking it seriously and are actively engaged in how they regulate this. And we're seeing a lot of new exchanges pop up to try to serve security token needs. And I think that actually may be the next big wave of adoption that really drives the industry forward, because it's sort of a very simple things that a traditional company can do to access the benefits of the ecosystem, right? Every company has equity or shares or units in their company, and most of them are privately held. It's very difficult to transfer them, to settle those records, to
and
have
expensive.
A secondary market.
And most importantly, is also extremely expensive.
Yeah, exactly. And so getting that to the push of a button and it instantly transfers, it's really, really exciting. So we work with Polymath, it's a great platform, Abacus, and others that are writing the smart contracts, doing the issuance, and are building the exchanges themselves. So it's
fascinating to me that we can use this technology and not just make things faster in some ways, but also make them cheaper.
Right.
Which is, to me, is perfect, right?
Sure.
I want it faster and I want it cheaper, and let's accelerate that. And my last question for you would be, if you had one wish that you could have for for people that are in the industry, what would you ask from them that you, in your opinion, would excel our industry to better standards, to more, to adoption, to whatever it is?
We just released some white papers about the idea of sort of how you do adoption and growth in blockchain. And we called it Growth ABCs, and also talked about token pledging, how you can incentivize experts to come in and help with growth. You know, I think that's what we really have to do, is focus first on customers and users and what they need and serving their pain points, instead of creating products and then thinking about like where it goes or where it's useful. You have to start with the consumers first. And so I think for this next level, we really need to focus on very obvious pain points that we can address, whether that's remittances in the developing world or those painful high costs of transferring shares in private ownership. You know, I think a lot of people have been chasing use cases that are exciting, where like it's slightly faster to transfer like a public share, but there's already a liquid market for public shares. It's not as compelling as something where we're creating something that's never existed before, like a liquid secondary market for private shares. So that's to me, I think, where we need to focus, are the areas where the real user pain is.
Is this white paper published already?
Mm-hmm.
Where could viewers find you that way?
Just look up David A. Johnston on Medium, and you'll see my blog, and I've posted the white papers there. And sort of the idea is to answer the question of what's next, because a lot of people did a token sale, and if they've managed their process correctly, they're getting to mainnet and they're launching their software. But now what? Right? In traditional, software companies, you would do another funding round, and you would have sort of growth based on more capital from investors. But that's not really how these are structured, right? You're not going to do another token sale. Like, you've already done that. It's already
unless some of the companies that ran out of money and now are scrambling to raise. But those, I think, that will just keep.
There's always a process in startups where some of the ideas don't work out and some of them do work out. But even if they worked out, the question is, how do you fuel that next stage of growth? So with the token pledging paper, we're sort of answering that question of what's next. Well, we can use those resources now of the tokens that have been created to incentivize a group like YGC to partner with the protocol and really drive user adoption, sales teams, marketing campaigns. We have folks on our team that have driven hundreds of millions of dollars of e-commerce sales, through Facebook and other platforms. Those are the kind of people we have to pull into this industry and say, okay, now let's do that for these decentralized projects.
What's the best way to follow you?
For my long form stuff, probably on Medium, D Johnston EC, and it's the same handle for Twitter.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. And thank you for your time. I will be back to you soon.
Thanks.